Joining me now is author and columnist for Spiked, Rob Lyons, and researcher and author Laurie Leybourne-Langton. Laurie, here's the argument for fracking. The argument is that we're importing natural gas. We need to use it. The Boris Johnson vision of 2035, is a long, long way away. And given that we need the stuff anyway, and given that there could be supply problems, that it makes sense to be self-sufficient and therefore to frack for gas in the northwest of England.
Three problems. The first is that you can't go from nothing to something very quickly, right? We'd have to develop a whole massive fracking industry. The US took a couple of decades to get to the point that we now look at them as having developed. The second thing is, it's very different to what it's like in the US, right? The geology, the way the ground is set up in the UK is very different to how it is in the US. Population's more dense, there are more people packed in together. It's just much harder to do it here in the UK. So the gas field that you mentioned earlier, got a lot of gas in it, right? But only a few % of that is in any way viable that we could actually get anywhere near. A third thing is that, as we just heard from Professor Thomas just now, we are still at the mercy of international commodity markets when it comes to gas. Unless we were to nationalise the entire fracking and gas industry in the UK and just turn in on ourselves, we're going to have to pay the same prices we're seeing internationally. And if we say, do you know what, our frack gas costs a load, we don't want to pay for it, then it's going to go abroad. So, those three reasons, alongside the big environmental reasons as well, mean that this is not a non-viable direction. The government has said that, and I agree with them.
Well, I have to say, in answer to that, Laurie, I feel we should have started fracking years ago. Personally, on the population density, I mean, of course, we are a much denser population than Montana, for argument's sake, in the USA, and I totally understand that, although there are quite large parts of the northwest of England that are lowly populated. But I understand you've made the case. Well, let's get a perhaps different point of view on all of this. And I'm going to ask you, Rob, give me your argument why we should be fracking in the northwest of England.
Well, because I think that having supplies of gas of your own, as a backstop, there is a national security question. But I think the main factors are the world market for gas. And on the day-to-day level, that's really what we're talking about here. So it will make a small dent in the world market price of gas, but it will also, if we're exporting this en masse, then we will be bringing in revenue to the country. So that it's a potential export opportunity as well. But you're right. The reason we're in this mess at the moment, and why fracking right now would never get us out of this mess, is because we should have been doing it, starting to ramp up fracking 10 years ago. And we should start fracking as soon as possible, so that we don't get into this mess as badly as we are again.
Well, Rob, strategically, I absolutely agree with you. I think we should have started this years ago. However, the one point that Laurie and his side of the argument have made, and advertised, propagandized, choose whichever word you want, but the one argument that has had resonance amongst the residents of Blackpool and many other areas in the northwest is the argument about geology, and the argument that one of the original shafts that was driven caused a minor earthquake, and people hear the word earthquake and everyone starts to panic. How can we, Rob, I put it to you, how can we reassure people in the northwest of England that going for gas extraction through fracking isn't a risk to them?
Well, the word earthquake gets bandied around very, very easily these days. Things that would once have been called just minor tremors are now routinely being called earthquakes whenever it comes to fracking. I read one report recently of the big earthquake in Blackpool a couple of years ago, and one woman said it was very scary. A plate fell off a shelf. That's the levels of sort of vibration that we're talking about here aren't dissimilar to having a lorry drive past your front door or for construction work going on. And these kinds of movements aren't exclusive to fracking by any means. They were, a quarter of earth tremors in the UK in the 80s and 90s were caused by coal mining. Tremors are also a problem for geothermal energy. The bigger and deeper that you go with geothermal energy, the more likely you are to going to shift the ground. This is just part and parcel of working with the earth, when you have to do stuff underground. I think that these are a very minor hazard, and I think that the rules that have been set on fracking companies about when they have to stop operations in the past, and obviously now we have a complete moratorium on it in England. But those rules were just simply too tight. They were unreasonable, given the dangers that were being presented by these very minor earthquakes.
Fine. No, you've made the point. So, Laurie, here's the point. There is no form of extractive industry that doesn't lead to a few very minor earth tremors. But the truth of it is that your side of the argument have spread hysteria that has made us dependent on foreign sources of energy, which you never know, at some point might run out for strategic reasons. And you've denied tens of thousands of people in the northwest of England well-paid jobs.
That's quite a list of accusations to level at me.
Well, they're not accusations, they're debating points. Come on. I mean...
Sure, but I've never said any of these things, right? So when I said geology earlier, I wasn't talking about tremors. I partially agree with you, Rob. I never seen them. I've seen the reports about them. I'm sure they were scary to people. The real issue here is not necessarily the geology of there being tremors and stuff. It's just the way the ground works in the UK is different to the US. It's much harder and more expensive. And that's one of the many reasons why the market didn't work out before. But the main one is that you can't buck those commodity markets. I mean, you know this, Nigel, from, I think, your past in trading.
I did trade commodities, yeah.
You can't buck those markets. Right now, gas prices are high. Yep. We wouldn't, as Professor Thomas said, we wouldn't be able to make a dent on those prices with the kind of supply that we could drag up in the UK, even if it were viable. Now, when it comes to the point about the government being unstrategic in energy markets, I totally agree with it. But the issue there is not that it didn't invest in fracking. The issue is it didn't bring forward home insulation earlier than is happening now. It didn't invest quick and fast enough in an array of not just renewables, but also the ability to make sure the electricity grid is much better at not wasting energy, of making sure it optimizes the time where we need energy at different times. Those are the massive strategic mistakes of the government, not kind of going into the dead end that was the fracking market. And I tell you, look, we could have had a big fracking industry in this country and we would still be in the trouble that we're in right now because of those international markets.
Well, look, I don't disagree with you that our energy strategy across the board, has been catastrophically badly managed. You and I agree totally on that point. And yes, you're right. The amount of gas that we extract from the northwest of England is not going to impact the global price of gas, but it could give us surety of supply. But gentlemen, thank you, both of you, for a civil debate around whether we should be fracking in the northwest of England, and both putting your points of view very clearly and with passion.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.